Specifically downtown Wall Street now, New York Stock Exchange, the stock market plunging after the Federal Reserve scaled back its expectations for interest rate cuts next year. The Dow falling more than 1,100 points. That is the largest drop for the index since August.
And the dip marks the 10th consecutive day of losses for the Dow, its longest losing streak since 1974. With us now, Pete Sepp is the president of the National Taxpayers Union. David Hebert with the American Institute for Economic Research. Gentlemen, welcome. Thanks for coming on. And of course, I think that the big picture here is that this news follows the news from the Fed, cutting interest rates a 0.25 percentage point yesterday, something that might have been anticipated, but also signaling it could be one of the only few cuts we can anticipate for next year, maybe two more ahead, down from the 4 reductions forecasted in September. So, Pete, what does this all mean for everyday Americans?
Well, for everyday Americans, there needs to be a continued concern over inflation and what other arms of Washington, D.C., besides the Federal Reserve, are going to be doing in 2025. Look, futures for the Dow and the S&P seem to be on the rise, so maybe the markets have priced in the fact now that there might only be 2 rate cuts. But we also have inflation worries over things like tariffs, import taxes, basically, that could hurt building materials. Housing and housing starts have been one of the problems in this economy and one of the stickiest parts of inflation. Also, this mammoth spending bill that is on Congress's agenda, if they don't slim it down and make it a clean continuing resolution that just keeps the government open, well, they're going to be contributing to inflation.
Yeah, and that's one of the biggest points by President-elect Donald Trump, Elon Musk, those that participate in Doge, if you will, speaking out about that. Again, still watching it. That bill's gone. Will there be a clean CR? Could you get Democrat support for that? But when asked specifically, David, about President-elect Donald Trump's fiscal policies, Fed Chair Jerome Powell had this to say. He says, quote, "We need to take our time, not rush and make a very careful assessment, but only when we've actually seen what the policies are and how they've been implemented. We're just not at that stage." How do you see Trump's plans, the threat of tariffs or tax cuts, even mass deportations, obviously will be costly as well, but affecting the Fed's upcoming decisions?
Yeah, so it seems like almost every day there's a new tax cut or a new policy coming out of the Trump incoming administration. And so this does create a lot of uncertainty about, what exactly will 2025 and this next presidency look like in terms of economic policy. Some of it we know there will be tax cuts, there will be some cuts to regulation, there will be some government efficiency increases, or at least hopefully. But a lot of it we don't, and a lot of the details are going to depend on how these things are actually implemented. And so Chairman Powell, in a moment of perhaps wisdom, is saying, hey, we got to wait and see. But this is also coming from a guy who says that they've moved very quickly to try to stamp out inflation when, in fact, for almost 18 months, they thought it would be transitory and would go away very quickly. And who, at some level this past fall, just decided to try to play catch up real quick by raising rates really fast. And so it's hard for me to sit here and say that Chairman Powell is being wise in this. The longer he takes to get inflation down to that promised 2%, the longer it's going to take for real wage growth to catch up to these awfully high prices that every American is experiencing. And so now we're getting indication that Powell himself doesn't even think this is going to happen until 2027. So this is it's kind of a disaster. Yeah. We do have runaway government spending. We do need to adjust the budget proposal that's in there, sure, but we also need to keep the government open. So this is a very tricky situation for everyone in Congress right now.
Yeah. As opening bell rings on Wall Street, it is a new day. How will the stock market react? We'll wait and see. Pete Sepp, David Hebert, thanks so much for joining us this morning.
My pleasure.
Thank you.
Well, the Supreme Court agreeing to hear arguments